Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode, another conversation with Michael Carson. I'm your host, Michael Carson. I'm so glad that you tuned in tonight with us. We are grateful tonight to have another phenomenal guest on the show. If you are watching us for the first time, please click the share button and put in a comment on Facebook. If you're watching us via YouTube, make sure that you click that subscribe button and that bell so that you'll be notified when we're on the air. Also, we're here every Thursday night for the most part, every Thursday around 7 p.m. Eastern time, where I'll bring, again, just nothing but the best guests, nothing but the best conversations, I like to think. And with your participation and with you joining, it just makes the show even that much better. Also tonight, if you want to drop a comment, drop a question for our guests. I know a number of people tell me, man, we watched the show. Let me know you're watching the show by dropping a comment or dropping a question to the guests. We don't want you to be left out, and we want you to be engaged. So it's not just you watching, but you also getting involved in the conversation. I want to give a shout out to my cousin, Lorraine Condi Carson. If it wasn't for her, I wouldn't have known about my special guest tonight. And so I want to give her a shout out so she won't be blowing up my cell phone. It's like, you wouldn't even known about the guest if I hadn't told you or introduced you to him. So I'm excited to have on with me tonight none other than he is a CEO, he's a president, he's an entrepreneur. He's, I think he's a trailblazer, a Renaissance man. A number of y'all might have heard about, the Johnson family with Jet and Ebony and the like, but I think my guest, Mr. Randi Payton, is such a gentleman who's worthy of such an honor for what he's done. I've read his bio and looked at his work, and I think he's a trailblazer also. So please welcome to the show tonight, my guest, Mr. Randi Payton. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Appreciate it, man. So just to let you guests know, he's in Maryland. I'm a DC native. So shout out to all my family in DC, Maryland, in the DMV area. Love you guys much. Would love to see you on the show more often, watching the show, and also hit me up. To my grandmother who's in Maryland, love you tremendously. And just wishing all the best for you. So, Mr. Payton, tell us who is Randi Payton? Tell us about your journey. Give us a little bit about your history and your story.
Well, I'm kind of modest, but some people say I'm the godfather of the automotive diversity.
Yeah.
I grew up in Camden, New Jersey.
Okay.
And, one of the highest crime rate cities in the nation for a while. Mm-hmm. And I made it out of there and grew up in the projects there, joined the Marine Corps, went to Vietnam, etc., did all that. My background is in journalism, media. I started, I talk about how I got started in writing. In my freshman year in University District of Columbia, before I even took one journalism course, people told me that it was impossible to write for the Washington Post. And
Wow.
Don't never tell me I can't do something, because that's what I'm going to prove.
Right.
I used my skills that I got from the street, slipped through security one time, got in the newsroom, asked for an assignment. They kicked me out. I got in there second time, they kicked me out. The third time, the editor was like, how did he keep getting in here?
Right, right.
She figured she'll just give me a little assignment because, look, I didn't have a lot of skill and all that, and that I would fail. And I did great. So my first year in UDC, I was freelance for the Washington Post, But I'm the kind of guy, man, everywhere I've been throughout my career, I've always had young people that I was training. Became the editor of the Washington Afro. I started the magazine, the first African-American national automotive magazine and technical magazine in the country, basically, back in 1995. And at the same time, I launched the first magazine, automotive magazine in the country on the World Wide Web. Back
Hmm.
then, people thought I was crazy. They said,
Yeah.
this thing won't work. Car and driver, motor trend, all of them like, ain't nobody gonna go online and read about no cars, you know. But I launched my first website back then called On Wheels Incorporated. And since then, I've been trying to not only educate our consumers, because what I found out writing for the Washington Afro, there was a network of over 250 black newspapers in the country, and in those newspapers, they had a section on just about everything, sports, religion, you name it, everything but cars, everything but automotive. And I'm like, okay, I was motivated by that because a need to fill the void, because for most of us, it's our second largest expense next to buying a house, and we have very little education and information about. So we're losing thousands of dollars because we're just not receiving information. We don't know what to buy. We don't know how to buy, et cetera, et cetera. And so I became motivated by that mission to provide consumer content, not buff book stuff. A lot of folks love cars. I
Hmm.
didn't enter it with love for cars and oil running through my veins like a lot of other auto writers have. I entered it out of a need to fill a void um, in communications in our community, and uh, that expanded because not only did you are you educating people, but I've also found myself a need to educate the industry about our culture,
Hmm.
because we're the second largest car market in the country, and they were not reaching us.
Okay.
Um, so at the same time, I was educating the industry. So therefore, I had to target major media that a lot of the executives, the CEOs and presidents were reading, the trade pubs, da da da. And diversity was not a good word back then. It was not a good
Yeah.
thing. But
It
what I
still
did,
isn't today.
yeah, what I did is I dug up so much history on our culture, our automotive culture. The first
Hmm.
black automaker, C.R. Patterson, back in 1906, who was an escaped slave, swam across the Ohio River and started a manufacturing plant. And I found articles and all that from back then when his car was
Wow.
actually better than the Ford Model T. People hadn't heard of that stuff.
Right.
They thought that we didn't like motorsports, and I dug up so much history about motorsports. How
Hmm.
back then cars were based on the horse carriages, and we were the master craftsmen in building the horse carriages. We were the ones who took the motors and put them on the horse carriages and started
Hmm.
racing them up and down the street. And the whites were like, "What are y'all doing?" You know,
Right.
that was the beginning of motorsports. You know, and one of the largest spectator sports for us back then was motorsports,
Okay.
until they stopped us, started hanging us, destroying our cars, a lot of history. They had known about that, so that woke up a lot of the other
Hmm.
white media,
Right.
car and driver, motor trend. They started rerunning our stuff. But see, it was that calming love for automobiles that
Right.
made diversity a good word. And so it was the CEOs at the time when I launched my magazine as an insert in 43 black newspapers and
Mhm.
zone subscribers of the Washington Post, uh, Detroit News and Free Press, and a few other mainstream papers. If you had a subscription, you would get it in your Sunday paper.
Okay.
Uh, so when I launched that, at that time, no luxury manufacturer car company was advertising any minority media, not Ebony,
Mm.
not Black Enterprise,
Mm.
and most companies were not even targeting us. The only ones targeting us was the big three, Ford, GM, Chrysler at the time. So I came out the gate with full page ads from Jaguar, BMW,
Wow.
Mercedes,
Okay.
GMC. And not only did I do that, I did something that's unheard of. Their agencies, the CEOs and presidents, I built relationships with them because they
Mm.
saw what I was trying to do, and they saw a need for it. So they made their agencies pay me in advance to produce my
Wow.
magazine. Now keep in mind, I launched at 500,000 magazines, so the
Mm.
cost of producing it was very very high, full color, glossy, all of that. So that got me off the ground. And from there, we expanded that to 750,000. Later on, we launched another magazine for the Latino market called Latinos on Wheels.
Yeah.
And then we launched Asians on Wheels. So we covered the whole multicultural spectrum. In addition to that, we saw a need with the advent of the World Wide Web or the internet.
Mhm.
I saw a need to generate content to because that's what people go to the internet for. That's why we use our mobile
Right.
phones. We
Right.
don't use them to find ads. We use them to find content, information, and we
Yeah.
want it quickly. So
Yeah.
a lot of that content that the industry needed to diversify didn't exist.
Yeah.
So we created the Urban Wheel Awards, and we put together a panel of about 15 independent journalists who would judge the best car, the best truck, the best corporation, suppliers of the year, dealer, all these categories. And then we partnered with over 200 different organizations and media in order to
Mhm.
distribute that content through their organizations, through their websites, through their media. So Urban Will Awards became a content generator. It was not just an event that you go to with over 2,000 people, but we were able to bring in all types of people of almost every ethnic background. So it became one of the most diverse events in the country.
Wow.
Uh, yeah, not from
So,
just yeah, not just from
so
ethnics, but also professions.
yeah.
Mhm.
So for those of you that are watching, just know that we are not going to get through all of the questions I have tonight. So if you want to join this conversation, please do so on this platform. But right after this, we're going to jump on Instagram Live for about 10 minutes or so to finish up the conversation. So I'm just forewarning you, we're already halfway through the show, and I only asked one question. So there is a lot of history. This man is a history maker. This man is a pioneer. And we should all know about him, and we should all respect the work and what he's done for I just think if people just in the whole digital space, I mean, because me personally, I've been trying and putting it off, trying to get a digital magazine together for men. And so for individuals in my shoes who've procrastinated, done some things, set it aside or whatever, what advice do you give to them? It's like, okay, we want to launch a digital magazine, not necessarily a print one, but one that's digital, because a lot of people aren't picking up, books and magazines like they used to. At least that's what we're told, anyway.
Well, we actually launched our first. We were actually the first minority media to actually go digital
Oh,
as
okay.
a supplement to our print magazine. We also was one of the. Well, actually, we won two global magnum opus publishing awards for being the
Mhm.
first awards event in the country to actually launch a digital magazine a week before our award show, with links to our advertisers and online. Which you go to an event, you get a print publication. That's it. But this lasts forever once it's
Mhm.
digital. My advice would be to there are a lot of ways to get advertising support these days. There are
Mhm.
videos and advertisers that come with them. There are different ways to get ads around your content. And you might want to buy lists
Mhm.
targeting the men. Whatever magazine you want to, whatever your focus is, you might want to buy really, really good opt-in lists.
Mhm.
And offer the magazine to folks. So even if it's free, once you get your subscriber base up, that's going to constantly increase your ad rates. But in addition, to really maximize on your ad rates, do your magazine in conjunction with an event,
Okay.
because the event is going to garner more sponsorship, and you package in your ads and all of that with the event.
Okay.
If your focus is on men, then you do an event around that, right?
Okay.
And the sponsors will come in, and they can also buy the ads for 6 months to a year in conjunction with sponsoring the event.
So how do you, because a lot of what we hear and see on social media, everybody's a journalist on social media. They might have gone to journalist school, but they're more, they're content owners, they're influencers, and it's more now. I mean, we see comparisons of artists to Michael Jackson and of that, because they have a lot of people that stream their music or like. So how do you, in the digital space, how do you compete with influencers and people who Is it because you already have that platform that you've laid out for the last 20 something years, or how do you keep it fresh? How do you keep it where people who haven't followed you 20 years ago, they will want to continue to follow what you guys are doing?
Well, what I did is I leveraged my relationship in the auto industry to attract celebrities to my event free of charge in the wintertime in Detroit. Celebrities, NFL, NBA players, they would A-list celebs, actors, rap artists, they would comedians, they would all come to my event because I created a first class event that would attract global CEOs and presidents. And so therefore all the marketing people are there, or the top media are there. And so when the celebrities come to my event, they can afford to be presenters. I use them as presenters to present the various awards because they get multi-million-dollar endorsement deals when they meet these people at my event. Where else can a celebrity go and meet a CEO and president of General Motors or Toyota,
Right.
And same thing goes for in motorsports and others. They all come to that event. But that was the first thing. And what attracted the CEOs and presidents was the credibility of the event. By having an independent panel of journalists, that took me out the picture. It took my staff out the picture. The awards were credible. And the best thing that a company or corporation can do is win a major award. Because now, if he wins that award by a panel of independent journalists, it's going to garner media all over the world. It's going to garner the dealers will be able to talk about this and drive people to the showrooms. The bottom line, it took diversity from just being in the PR space where you just sponsor traditional NAACP and other traditional to business case. Now we're talking about selling cars, and by opening and expanding the communication. See, I didn't just create my own magazine and my own automotive space. I went out and recruited other journalists to come into the space. I provided content. I introduced minority journalists, Latinos, African American, Asians to the industry so they could all begin to write. So I literally created my own competitors. And people were like, why you create your own competitors? Because my focus was more on the big picture, not fighting over crumbs. Why we got to fight over crumbs when we can have a bigger slice of the pie, And so that's kind of how what my approach was.
I now have a good reason to get my ticket to come to the DMV area so we can go out and have a long dinner and a long so I can sit before you and soak up some of this knowledge firsthand.
Michael, let me also say this too, in terms of opening that door to the automotive industry. It was a big boy network. I was one of the first into it. Aside from my mentor, Warren Brown, who was automotive writer for the Washington Post, is that I started a nonprofit. Right as soon as after I started the profit, I started the Edward Davis Education Foundation. And Jaguar, the car company, actually funded the program, which allowed me to pay my interns $8 to $14 an hour. And from there, I was able to recruit, my son, other young people straight out of, HBCU schools and stuff, and train them in all these different areas. And then they help take it to another level, But I've over the years, I've trained over and mentored and provided scholarships to over 400 young people.
Yeah, I wanted to.
In the space.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to transition to. I wanted to talk a little bit about your nonprofit work with Emerging Diversity Education Foundation and the what you just mentioned. Why was that important to you to get into the nonprofit space and to give back in the way that you gave back?
Because, like I said, throughout my career, every job I've been to, everywhere I've been, I've always been training and recruiting young people. That's just my passion, So it made sense to launch the nonprofit, and through the nonprofit, we were able to train young people, and not just automotive writing, but PR, marketing, accounting, all these different areas. I mean, we even got some young people from when New Orleans had the flood. We got a couple young people from there that we trained. through our nonprofit. So that's always, and they're our future. Young people are our future.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. So, how is the automobile, besides some of the things you talked about earlier about, we don't get credit for a lot of stuff. People always tell us to go back somewhere, and it's like, if it weren't for us, a lot of the stuff that people enjoy today wouldn't be what it is if it wasn't for, for African American people who helped to build this country. So, how have you been able to, in the space that you created, because I think you created a space, how have you been able to deal with the discrimination, or highlight or bring out the discrimination in the automobile industry, or to bring light to it? Maybe not so much to call them out, but to talk about things that could be changed, and how we are just as important to that space as anyone else.
Well, what we did was focused on the positive
Mhm.
side of the industry and created the award. So therefore, if you got the leaders in the industry, you got an event where the leaders are actually coming and seeing what the measurement is. They're going,
Yeah.
I mean, diversity, literally, a lot of the CEOs and presidents of Toyota and a lot of companies, Nissan and stuff, were coming to our event, had Jaguar, some of them had very few minority employees or none at all. But after coming to
Mhm.
our event, they immediately went back. And I remember we had an Executive of the Year award. One of the criterias was to be a vice president, executive level, but there were no
Mhm.
black women in vice presidents. So what we did
Wow.
is we created a Woman of the Year award,
Okay.
and CEOs and presidents saw that, man. They saw that talent and immediately went back. Toyota was the first one to hire a black woman VP. That category lasted about 3 years, and we killed it once there were enough African American female vice presidents. And it was that category, that award show, and getting these folks there that created that. But at the same time, as diversity began to expand,
Mhm.
um, and they started creating positions, diversity managers, the
Mhm.
minority agencies, and stuff like that. I don't know. A lot of them were the ones that got in between us and the decision makers. It's
Right.
they. I guess they thought their role was to keep the CEOs and presidents from coming to our events or something,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
And so that had a negative impact. I also had a challenge in the Latino and Asian markets, whereas
Mhm.
I found firsthand by dealing with the Latino market, I was like everybody else. I thought that when you talked about Latinos, you talk about minority disadvantaged people who
Mhm.
deserve to have, programs and civil right, supplier
Right.
diversity, dealer diversity. But what I found out later was that a lot of the agencies that worked for the auto companies were not minorities. They were white Latinos, and I
Right.
found out that the white Latinos is very conservative, and they don't work
Yeah.
with people of color in South America or in America,
America.
and they
Yeah.
refused to work. I even had a Mexican publisher of the publication. They didn't want to work with him, and we were the only national uh, Latino automotive magazine in the country. And Ford,
Wow.
the president, was like, "You got y'all need to work with them. Y'all need to advertise because we're selling
Mhm.
cars. We're not selling toothpaste." You know,
Right.
they refused. So I learned that the hard way. I also found
Yeah.
out that in the Asian market, although most Asians, majority of Asians, are third, fourth, fifth generation and speaks primarily English and get their information in, the agencies would only do language,
Mhm.
and so there was a lot of challenges. Put it that way. Not just not just amongst discrimination from whites and blacks, but within our own ranks as well.
Wow. Wow. What a and I'm sure you have some backstories to go with that.
Yeah, I got a lot. I mean, and just like we've been inventors. We've invented so much that it's just
Yeah.
ridiculous. But we never hardly get credit for it.
Yeah.
And it's the same issue, if a white person comes along, just like C.R. Patterson, his car was better than the Model T at the time, but he couldn't
Mhm.
get the funding. Henry
Yeah.
Ford got the funding. That was the difference.
Yeah.
We came along with the only automotive content magazine targeting minorities in the country. And the companies would go to I think it was blackvoices.com. General Motors gave them 15 million because they're owned by the Tribune. 15 million to create an automotive content section.
Wow.
They didn't have it, so they had to come to us for it.
Wow.
And we are all that's what I'm saying. So the opportunities as far as financing, getting loans from banks is still a challenge for us. Even with the SBA. SBA doesn't give out loans, the banks do. And the banks still will not work. I mean, that's what reason why, as you see throughout our community, who owns all the grocery stores, the mom and pop stores, and we don't own them because we don't get the financing and they do. That's the
I was gonna ask you on your journey as a publisher. Have you seen such that you had to use a lot of your own money over the years, or banks coming in saying, "Hey, we like what you're doing, and we want to get involved in this as well"?
No, we had I had to use my own money over the years.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, in 2008, the market crashed. Not just the housing market, but the financial market and the automotive industry. All crashed about the same time. So that was a challenge too.
So I want to commend you on your work around seatbelt safety. I read in your bio the work that you've done with that, and you've been recognized for that work by the White House. What besides the seatbelt, what other things should we consider when we're buying a car? Most people they love the bling of the car. It's a fresh car. They love the smell. They'll put the seatbelt on because it's regulated. But what other safety things should we really be concerned about? Maybe one or two things you can point out that we really typically don't pay attention to.
Let me just say this. I'm very passionate about vehicle safety because people don't realize until they're in an accident, if they survive, how dangerous it is. And so one of the main things people are thinking about was how, buying a used car and how much they can save versus a new car with all the latest technology. It's very difficult to crash or get hit in these new cars. They got radars all around them. I mean, they will stop if you fall asleep, all kinds of stuff, safety cages that will protect your body, your life. So I recommend the latest car you can get, with the latest technology to save your life, because we are in a dangerous situation. The highways today are very, very dangerous, and especially to take your young person and take them all the way through school, 4.0 average, doing great, ready to go off to college, got a scholarship or whatever. I gotta go to Atlanta. Got to drive. So what you do is you give them your old used car and say drive off to Atlanta. Right. And he get the number one cause of death. Number one, not crime, nothing else. The number one cause of death among young people, African Americans, between 14 and 21 is car crashes.
Wow.
And parents don't realize it. They don't realize it. They send them on and then they lose them. It's best to get the latest car you can get, the best technology for that very reason. Save their life. Look at what happened with Tiger Woods. He was in the new Genesis GV80. That SUV has a safety cage, high steel safety cage. That everything else is crushed. It's like a race car. You are protected by that cage. Tiger Woods, and plus if the car has a warning. So if you fall asleep or go out the lane, it'll either stop itself. But if you step on the gas, the car's thinking, oh, he was want to go that way. That's what Tiger Woods said. He stepped on the gas. But if it had not been that vehicle, he probably wouldn't be here today.
Wow. Look, it is 7:30 already, and I still got a bunch of questions on here. If you've been watching, you have been watching Conversations with Michael Carson. This is part 2 of our entrepreneur series. I have what I consider automobile magazine pioneer, as he talked about vehicle safety and just in the whole journalism, digital magazine market space. My guest, Mr. Randi Payton. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. I'm going to give him the last words in a few minutes before we sign off. But again, click the share button. There are people who need to know who Randi Payton is. Please click the share button. At the bottom of the screen, we have their website up. The website is under construction, and he informed me that it will be operable in the next day or so. So make sure that you go to his website, sign up for a subscription. I'm going to do it because there's some things I want to learn and want to know, and I want to support Black business. So make sure you do that. But also, if you're following us on YouTube or watching us on YouTube, make sure you click the subscribe button and click that bell so that you will know when our next show is. We'll be back next week, but before we go, I want to give my guest, Mr. Randi Payton, the last final words before we close out. Mr. Payton.
Thank you, Michael. And I advise people to go to decisivemedia.net for the latest consumer written automotive reviews, consumer information, consumer tips on how to buy a car. You can contact me directly. I'll be free to give you advice. And that's it. I mean, I've been doing this since 3 years before that. So since around mid 1990s. And automotive is not the only thing I do. I also dance. So
we definitely have to talk about the jazz piece. I didn't know about the jazz piece, so we definitely have to talk about the jazz piece. Again, if you want to know about the jazz piece, I'm going to ask about the jazz piece. If you join us on Instagram Live at about 8 minutes or so. So again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. Until next time, continue blessings, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for tuning into Conversations with Michael Carson. Join us here each Thursday night at 7 p.m. Eastern Time for engaging and insightful conversations. We hope you enjoyed the show. If you have not already done so, don't forget to click the share button on Facebook and the subscribe button on YouTube. The conversation doesn't stop here. Head over to Instagram and join us on Michael Carson Jr. starting shortly. See you soon, and until next time, continue blessings.